Hey, it's Heather Chauvin, wife, mother of 3 boys, former social worker, dreamer, recovering rescuer, stage 4 cancer survivor. I started my motherhood journey when I was 18. I was single and living off government assistance. Beyond all of these titles and labels, I'm a human being, just like you, attempting to navigate it all while feeling good. My goal on this podcast is to show you that you can live an energized, sustainable life both at home and in your work. On this show, I attempt to keep it real with stories, interviews, and random thoughts. This is not a business or career podcast, and it's not a parenting podcast. It's both and so much more. You will laugh, you will cry, and maybe even get a little frustrated with the truth you've been hiding from yourself. I believe all human behavior is a language, whether it's through your child's behavior, your health, or a relationship. And when we learn to listen instead of react, we begin to understand what it truly means to feel alive and in control. If you haven't already, go grab a copy of my book, Dying to Be a Good Mother. You can purchase it wherever books are sold online. And if you're interested in how to integrate this work into your life and get quicker results, you can learn more about my mastery and mastery business coaching experiences at heatherchauvin.com/work with me. Heather Chauvin, CHAUVIN.com/work with me. And you have a personal question or a topic you'd like me to answer on this podcast, then text me 313-710-5199. 313-710-5199. All right, let's change your life. Let's dig in. Okay, so welcome everyone. This is, like I was saying before I hit record, of course, hit record and then a crazy car. This is the first official recording of Mom is in Control of a live podcast. And I just want to say before we dive into introducing the panelists today, the inspiration for doing live was that there are so many diverse conversations to have. And I'm finding that the more I'm supporting people in feeling in control, and I'm using air quotes, of their lives or their parenting, especially now, everything is just bubbling up to the surface. And there's a lot of conversations that we need to be having. And imperfection is something that I value and also something that I teach. And it is utter chaos at my house right now. School starts tomorrow. My son just got, literally before this podcast recorded, went to the clinic and he has like a little infection on his face that is contagious. So he can't go to school for the first week. And then as I'm about to hit record, my mom walks in and the dogs are going to bark. And so everyone is welcome here, all your life circumstances. And I don't have my office because it flooded over a month ago. So now I just have to walk around my house with my laptop and attempt to find a decent spot. So I have to let go of all of the rules of what perfection looks like, or that sense of I'll take action when, or I'll implement when this gets better, or when that gets better. And it's just like, you got to move with the wind. So that's my lesson here. But this is the topic that we're going to talk about is children/teens. Teens are children. They're also young adults, and mental and emotional health. And I want to introduce Lori and Natalie and just give a little bit of background into your perspective. Part of the series that I'm going to be doing too is not everybody needs to be some big expert with a book and a podcast. We can just be loving, caring parents or educators, teachers, coaches, whatever that is, everyday human beings, because I truly believe that everyone is an expert, especially when they've gone through their own story in parenting. So let's open this up. Welcome, Lori. We'll introduce you first if you just want to unmute yourself and give a little bit of a background, and then we'll dive into kind of the questions.
Sure. So I'm Lori. I am a former educator. I was an educator for about 15 years and an interventionist. And what that means is a lot of my students had trauma background. So emotional behavior, things happening in the classroom where they really needed some sort of intervention to make them successful. I am also a mom. My sons are 6 and 8. And when they were 5 and 3, my husband passed away. So I am well-versed in both personal and professional trauma and just trying to make the best out of every situation.
Awesome. Thank you. And Natalie.
There we go. Hi, I'm Natalie and I'm from Perth, Western Australia. So it's nice to be here with everybody.
And late at night.
So excuse me if I look a little tired, but it's all good. So I also am in education. So I work in a school as my full-time job. But on the side of that, I am a life and personal development coach for adolescent girls. And recently I've started coaching mums as well, because what I have learned over the last few years is really how important and critical it is that mum is healthy, because if she's not healthy, then they're definitely not healthy. So this is a new path for me. I've started Mind Fit for Mums now and just getting the ball rolling with the mums. In Australia, coaching is still relatively, it's not mainstream. So what I find is there is that resistance, to it. But once you have the right people and they start getting results, it's amazing. And so I'm really hoping that coaching starts to, take off in Australia as well. Yeah, but that's my passion. I do have 2 teens as well. My son's 18 and graduated and he's at uni, and my daughter's 14. So we're kind of in the thick of all that joy as well.
I love how we say all that joy. Can you briefly talk a little bit about, just in a nutshell of your son's journey and how you were very determined to support him?
Yeah. So when my son was 18 months old, he was diagnosed as being profoundly deaf. And when I was given that information, in the same hour, I was also told that he probably will never speak and he will need to sign full time. And so I need to start signing as well. And that he will most likely never go to a normal school. And basically, he's going to have mental health issues. There was everything wrapped up in this bow in this 1 hour diagnosis. And it was really devastating as a parent to learn that, what the heck, this is my baby. What are you talking about? And I remember at the time I kind of felt all of that pain and emotion. But after a while it was well, why does that have to be his future? I really just didn't sit well with me. So that was kind of the catalyst for me that made me just go on my own personal development journey and decide that that wasn't going to be his future. And look, along the way, there's been there's bullying, there's all of the usual stuff that comes with being different. But, what I found is that, it was me and my husband that were making the difference. So it wasn't taking him to 1 hour session each week and expecting this person to, give me back my son's hearing. It was up to us to literally drown him in language. And I quit my job and we moved to Sydney. And I just literally gave up, everything and drowned him in language. And I think, something that I was told, when I was researching all this auditory verbal therapy, was that this thing that I read said the amount of therapy the child receives is not the main factor in a child's progress. Rather, it is the amount of time the parents spend engaging their child in verbal dialogue and language. And that just stuck with me. And I thought, my God, this is not his job, it's mine. So to me, it's like we get a diagnosis and we believe they've got to go into the box with everyone else. But really, there's so much out there that, you know, if you just open your mind and you become a bit more conscious about what you're doing, like magic happens. And now he speaks normally. He does no sign language. He's at uni. He started his own business. And I think, my God, imagine if I'd like stopped at that diagnosis. So, yeah.
That makes me like my heart is so full, and it brings tears, like tears of joy to my eyes. That's where tears come out. I'm like, what? Where's the tears? And I think it gets me right there, because this is the conversation that we want to have. And I am all about leaving people better than I found them. And I don't know who kind of said that or how I adopted it, but in that sense, what it means is influence, that we all have influence. And so for the sake of this conversation, some may or may not even know who I am. So I'm just going to give you a little background, a little nutshell version of myself, so we can all have this conversation. So my background is in social work and child protection. So I used to work in a government agency working within child protection. I have 3 boys. They are currently 16, 11, and 8. And so when I became a mother, I was and my dogs are also scratching the door right there. When I became a mother, I was obsessed with mental health. My oldest son's biological father has now passed, but he died of a drug overdose and was diagnosed bipolar, schizophrenic, dual, all of it. And watching somebody suffer with their mind, right? Your mind is an organ and it is so powerful. And there's so much stigma around it culturally of like, well, why don't they just do this? And why don't they just do that? Or really understanding that, you know, well, wow, I wonder why people didn't think of that before. Like, oh yeah, you're right. Why don't I just stop doing that and my life will change? We really have to look at the stigma. And also there is no one size fits all. And these conversations are made to happen to realize that you have more power and influence than you perceive, right? So I also truly don't believe that our children's behavior is a reflection of quote unquote bad parenting. I don't think shaming a parent or a caregiver into like, you know, everything that your child does is a reflection of you. I think things are data and their symptoms and their signs, but putting shame or judgment on anything, right? Anything does not serve any human when it comes to growth. It just helps them shrink and go inside. So when my son was presenting to me small behaviors, anxiety, being a sensitive child, I mean, we hear so many things like spirited, strong-willed, all of these things. My brain went to worst case scenario because of his biology, right? So I go to worst case scenario. So kind of like Natalie, and I'm sure Lori in some capacity, like you jump in the deep end full, you're like, I'm going to solve this problem. But I was doing it from a place of fear as a parent, which was, but it was like positive fear. I wasn't trying to diagnose my son and find like how to fix him. I was like, let's think outside of the box, right? So that's when I found spirituality, meditation, mindfulness, consciousness, like critical thinking, right? Which is what we're talking about here is critical thinking. Like we can have a diagnosis, but your son is still a human having a human experience. And instead of saying, how do I communicate or how do I intervene with somebody with this diagnosis? How about we just see them as a human having a really challenging time? So as I continued on that journey, I realized kind of like what the conversation we're having here is, if I want my child to understand these life skills, I need to first understand them myself. Because if I say, okay, you're going to have these sessions with somebody else, and I'm like, what did you talk about? Right. And then you come back into the home and I'm just re-traumatizing you with my controlling nature or my reactionary, because I'm living in fear or whatever that is. So you're learning, you're growing as a caregiver, as a human being, as a parent. Your child is having their own learning and growth experience. And then it's two humans that come together, which creates a relationship. So when I hear people say, how do I get my child to listen to me? How do I get them to stop back talking? How do I, this is wild. Like, oh my gosh, this is a horrible developmental stage, or my child is blah, 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 or my teen. If it's horrible for you, imagine what it's like for that child. Yeah. So imagine what it's like to feel out of control with the structure, with the education, that how you're being taught, with maybe even the food that you have access to, everything, right? So it's really having empathy. And that's what I'm all about when it comes to parenting. I do believe in mental illness. I am a huge fan of medication. I am also a fan of right? And I do not believe in one size fits all. So the intention for this conversation is to get you to think. That's simply it. It's not saying, does somebody have the answer for me? Like, oh, what would you do for this? Or what would you do for that? I really want you to step into your power. And even if you walk into a healthcare provider's office, or you're talking to somebody and your gut is saying, not this, there's more, then go to your local bookstore, like start reading books, start becoming obsessed with podcasts, follow the breadcrumbs, engage in these conversations, because I believe having an empowered perspective of like, how can we, and hope and possibility, when you feel like someone's talking to you about, you might as well institutionalize your child, or, this is going to be a hard road for you. You're like, yeah, it's going to be hard, but can it be hard because it's a growth opportunity, instead of hard as like, it's just the compound effect. And we got to get uncomfortable. We have to stop avoiding. We have to stop making it about us, and that, if we like, oh, I don't want to go there. I'm just going to deflect and I'm just going to avoid. All behavior is a language, and I'm constantly watching my own behavior, my mental, physical, emotional health. I'm watching everybody else around me, and I try to nip that crap really quick so that it doesn't get into a crisis state. So welcome everybody for listening, and let's start engaging in the conversation. So let's have a conversation about behavior in itself. What are your philosophies when it comes to yelling, anger, all of that, when we see that in our children, when we're those big emotions? What's your perspective, Lori?
So in moments like that have escalated to the point of, throwing things and yelling, Heather, it's just like when you talk about the zones, like that language is just perfect, because when someone is in that state, you cannot have a rational conversation with them, right? The first priority is to de-escalate the situation and put them in a safe place, where they feel more in control of body and emotions, and maybe even like move to a new location. Right? Like, let's move to this other quiet place away from where we just were, where everything just kind of went out of control. That works both, in the classroom at school and at home, right? So at home, we created a little safe space, and this is where we go, where we can come. We have a little box. These are the things that you use, there's like a little Ziploc of Play-Doh. There's little things to like, you can throw it on the floor, you can tear it apart, but we're going to be in this safe spot where you're not going to hurt yourself or other people until you feel a little bit calmer. And trust me, my youngest son, my youngest son was removed from 2 preschools at the age of 4. I mean, for obvious reasons. When you have a little like that who has to deal with these really adult things and doesn't have the language, Natalie, you were talking about language. And, it's true in this situation too. When you don't have the words to identify what you're feeling and you don't have the language to talk about what you're experiencing, it comes out in behavior. You don't understand what's happening. And so you kind of lose control of your body as well. That's true at 4. That's true at 14. That's true at 21. So, getting those conversations going and having a plan in place, because it's not about if, right? It's usually about when you lose control, right? To have an idea of, okay, well, let's try this. And eventually you find something that works. But, I'm optimistic, but also realistic in these situations. I always think there's a solution. We just need to find it. But the reality is, you also can't live in fantasy land, right?
Love that.
Yeah.
Natalie, what's your perspective?
Yeah. Well, for me, with my own children, it's really getting to know who they are. Like I find with my son, when he's in a state like that, he wants to thrash it out, talk about it. He might want to punch something. Whereas my daughter wants to go in and shut the door and just be completely left alone. So over the years, I guess my way is always like, no, you want to talk it out. You want to, let's do this. And then that ends up just getting the door shut even harder. And so for me, it's just understanding, okay, she is not me. Her way of dealing is she needs that time to just let everything settle. And then later on, she will sit and talk to me when she's ready. And maybe I might be cooking dinner or whatever. But I've learned to actually respond like for who they are as well, rather than expecting them to respond how I want them to respond and when I want them to respond. So, and to me, with my coaching as well, and I'll get mums and they're quite stressed and, oh my God, she did this and she said this to me. And I said, okay, the first thing I ask is, and what did you do? And then most of the time it's, yeah, I lost my shit. And it's like, that's okay. Like you don't need to feel bad about it. But just pay attention to that, because when you're actually, conscious and looking for your own signals, you can respond rather than reacting in that heat of the moment. And I think a lot of people and parents haven't been taught that skill of how to actually just like be that oak tree and stand there. And regardless of what's going on, just be that strength there as well.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. The visual of the oak tree. I think so many people are going to be like, be an oak tree. And they're going to be like, I feel like a little twig right now. So, okay. So much that both of you said that I just want to kind of like reflect back or that I've had to learn along the way. But I think one was managing my own rage, anger, resentment, frustration. So one, as a culture, probably every human being is taught to shove down your emotions, right? So we have these life stressors or triggers. And so children's behavior can be a huge one. And so all the anger and resentment and frustration that you have suppressed for every area of your life is being pushed down, and they're just like poking holes at it and causing it to rise. And it's the same for the child, right? They're suppressing their frustration, and then you saying, hey, what's going on? Is just going to cause them to explode. So letting that spill out is actually a really, really good thing. But then there's shame and judgment on like how perfect it's supposed to look, and that our children can't talk to us that way, and blah, blah, blah. Another thing, so I had to start dealing with my own resentment and anger and frustration that these systems and people that I trusted, the illusion is like wiped away when you're like, oh, wow, this was set up to fail. This, like, And then you realize, oh crap, like everything else that's on my plate, now I need to be the advocate. Now I really need to push for this. And at the same time, educating your child, like it's okay. So there's a lot of undoing and unlearning. And there are a lot of people that I used to work with that just can't see that the system is set up to fail them. And they're angry and frustrated, which of course I would be too, right? So anger is natural. It's normal. Culturally, we're taught to not feel it and that it's bad. So we have to redefine that and reframe it. Another thing I want to bring up is if you feel like your child poo-poos all over you, you are most likely their safe zone. And that the reason why they lose it on you is because they've been holding it together all day around every other human. And I've heard this quote again and again, but it's one book or I've never read his book, but I would listen to him speak, is Josh Shipp. And I think it's SHIPP. And he has a book, something about teenagers, but he used to be in the foster care system and run away and act out and all of that. He said he would do that because fear of rejection, right? He's like, I'm going to get rejected again and again and again. So I'm just going to push these people away before they get too close. And one of his last foster families was like, you can't run away from us, like from a compassionate, loving place, not like you can't run away. Like we're not letting go of you. Like you can punch, you can scream, you can try to get rid of us so much, but we're going to show you what a loving, caring adult looks like. And so he had to go through all of that. But he said it was that he uses the quote, every child is one caring adult away. And I also heard somebody else say this, and I think it was, oh gosh, actually, I was listening to the podcast Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard. And it was actually his wife, Kristen Bell. She was doing her off one and she was talking about Oprah, but Oprah said this too. And there's research behind it that if every child has one caring adult, their success and resiliency rate skyrockets. And so if you were that constant for a child, even though 95% of their life is utter chaos, and that could be your own child, and you're like, I believe in you. You're going to get through this. We're going to get through this together. And you're just constantly that person for your child, which is what Natalie reminded me of like, we got this, we're going to do this. And yeah, you're not going to like me sometimes because we're going to have to recite this again and again and again. And I'm going to push you because I see your potential. So it doesn't always have to be rainbows and kitty cats. And I think there's a lot of grief there because we get so angry. Like, why does this need to be my child's path? Why? So that's where the deeper spiritual stuff comes in. Curious if this sparks anything for either of you.
Yeah, I've heard all of that. And I've actually thought about that in those moments of just deep, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with this? And knowing that, my older son is much more like Natalie's daughter, where it's, I want to be alone. I'm more likely going to shut the door. I'd rather disengage than, lose it. So I really liked, Natalie, what you said about, knowing each of them and what works. But Josh Shipp, I have that in the back of my mind often when my younger son is acting out, because it's like, he needs to know that I'm going to be here despite what happens. And, when I get angry, he will often ask, do you still love me? And I wonder, how many times, he's still young. So as a teenager, we might not ask that, but they might be thinking it, right?
Yes.
So that moment of, I've done something really bad. I know I've done this really bad thing, and it's probably bigger than what a 6-year-old does. Do they still love me? But I'm not going to ask that because that makes me really vulnerable. So I hope that I continue to keep that in the back of my mind. I think I will, because, that's often how I reacted to students in a classroom. I mean, I've had chairs thrown at me, and it's not the student in those moments, right? It's not about me in that moment. it's about all of the other things that they can't express. And it just, there's like a boiling point, right? And I love the oak tree because oftentimes I actually find myself like pushing, like I want to react this way, but I kind of just like push it through my feet into the ground and stay grounded, right? I have to be grounded in this moment. I can't be the one to continue the escalation. I have to be the calm, strong force here.
Oh, dang. I just got such a beautiful visual of like, I'm going to try that. Like just this, like visualizing the energy, like just holding you down. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Natalie.
Yeah. And I think another way I like to look at it as well is like, it's like she's having this, a thunderstorm happening. And the thing is, you can go in there and get wet, or you can put up your umbrella and just wait till it all kind of passes and then deal with it when skies look a little bit clearer. And for me, it's teaching that to mums as well, is really learning how to do that, because it's not easy when our emotions are contagious as well. And I think we're not aware of that as much. So, they're picking up on our energy and on, we don't have to say a word and they're all over us. They know exactly what we're thinking and feeling. And for me, it's actually takes a lot of energy to make that decision of how you want to show up in those moments that test you, and really practicing. And also, when that happens and you lose it, to not punish yourself, but kind of reflect on that. Okay, what happened? What was I thinking? What wasn't I thinking? What can I try next time? And it's being able to do that and then have an open conversation with your child as well. Look, I lost it as well, but I'm human too. And it's kind of having that real relationship where it's not like, I'm the almighty parent and, you're the naughty one. It's like we all stuff up and we're all going to get it wrong. But hey, how can we figure this out better next time? And I think it's learning those parenting conversations that really starts to make that shift in those relationships, So
I love that. I was just reflecting, and I've said this to people before, how many times did your parents apologize to you as a child? And most people, if raising children right now, would say never. And that, first of all, you can tell that there's a huge shift in the culture of parenting. And in the last year and a half, because one of my rules was we won't talk about the C word, but we can talk about mental health and how it's impacted families, but we won't talk about that specifically. Because I want it to be a bigger conversation. And I always say that everyone is in the same storm, but in very different boats and very different experiences. But my goal as a human, as a parent, was to always just allow my children to feel safe mentally, in their body, in their mind, and to feel loved. And so I had to let go of expectation. And I remember apologizing a lot and also saying, I love you. And like just randomly, I love you, I love you, I love you. And a few times my oldest would say to me, why do you still love me? Why do you forgive me so quickly when I mess up? And I'm like, because you're human and you're allowed to mess up. And I think that as an adult, we are still challenged with those thoughts, right? And beliefs of like, I messed up, I'm weak, I'm bad, I should know better. And I think that's essentially what our role is with children, is we're just their guide. Like we're their guide, and they're going to have their own journey that they have to go through. And there's nothing that we can specifically do to take that away except be the role model that we want them to be, especially when it comes to managing our emotions and emotional intelligence. I wanted to I wasn't sure I had all of these interactions. Okay. You ladies are spot on. I had all of these interactions with my daughter, and it feels so good to hear others say it, that this is the right way. Thank you. Awesome. If anyone else has questions that you would like us to answer or reflect on, please post them below. How do you respond/react when your teen deflects their anxious energy onto you? My son knows I am his safe space, and my husband and I do our best to co-create a calm, safe place in the home. So what would you both say to that? Go ahead, Lori.
I would often ask, is this a fix or a feel? Are you trying to just feel whatever you need to feel right now? Or are you engaging me because you need to fix something? And if it's a feel, let's try to find a way to say how you're feeling in a way that is not being mean to me. Because I think something we also need to keep in mind, yes, teens will often act out toward a parent, especially a parent that they, or a person that they know is like kind and has that unconditional love, right? This is a person that I can take everything out on because I know that they're going to love me anyway. The danger in that is that that's probably how they will act in a relationship later. So, for me, I always have that in the back of my mind. Yes, I understand what's happening right now. I understand what you're doing, but we need to find a better way to do this because I don't want you to think it's okay to treat other people this way.
Boundaries.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Mm. Yeah.
No, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. I was just like, that's a boundary, right? Because people are like, and if you have difficult boundaries, if you have a hard time implementing boundaries in your own life with other people, it's going to show up with children as well. And then you feel guilty and overcompensate. So Lori, I didn't want to cut you off. Just curious.
No, it's fine. It's just, I also tried very much to model that as well. When I see myself doing something, even if it's like I'm beating myself up about something, because I tend to internalize, right? I'm not going to act out. I'm not going to yell at someone. I'm going to yell at myself. And so I really try to like model what's going on in my head so that, my children can also see that, this isn't inhuman. Like this is a common thing, but we need to find a way to fix it. I think that also works with apologizing, right? The last time I apologized to my children, my 6-year-old's reaction was, I was waiting for that. Thank you. Right. This like super irritated with how I behaved. And my 8-year-old said, everybody makes mistakes, so, they're listening. And when you give them the opportunity to be on the other end of it, I think you learn what they've been learning, to see how your work pays off.
Love that. Natalie, what's your reaction to this question here?
Yeah, well, my one to this is, in the heat of the moment, we know that you can't have a conversation with them as well. So for me, I remind myself that really this is a programming thing. It's like their brain needs a little bit of a reprogram. And for me, it takes it out of that personal, like it is nothing personal. They're not trying to attack me or do anything. There's just a little bit of rewiring that we need to do. And you just be there in the moment. And then when everything is calmed down, I kind of, like with my son, I'll talk about his brain and actually, okay, this is what's happening. And even now when he's experiencing, difficult emotions, he'll say, Mum, my brain is thinking this. He never says, I am thinking this. It's my brain is thinking this. I'm like, oh yeah, I hear you. Yeah. Got it. What do you think we could do about that? What's another way you could choose to, get your brain to do something else? So for me, that's the strategy I take with this, is that it's not personal, that it is actually, it's like it's a little computer that just needs an update like our phones, So later when he's calm, we can have a chat and go, how about we just try this new strategy? It's just like a little update for your brain. And next time, hopefully you won't experience it so much, just give it a go, see what happens. And yeah.
I love that, because when you're talking about the brain, right? And it's not like I am. So it's not like the cloak of shame. It's like it's my brain. It's just my brain. And I got to figure out how to work with it. And I do believe that's kind of like the journey of becoming. So let's talk about special needs children, more neurodiverse. So neurodiverse and neurotypical, or atypical, they call it. Typical, neuro, and what am I saying this correctly? What's the terms that are used? It's like neuroatypical, which would be what they would label as special needs, but I think they're shifting the language a little bit, is a very big difference, right? Because we can, some people can't have these conversations with their children. Some are on different ends of the spectrum. And so there is a lot of self-regulation and knowing that that child may never be able to self-regulate. Yeah. So typical and not typical in our school. Okay. So yeah, just different places using different terminology. What's your perspective on that when it comes to that? Because I think there is a lot of emotional load that caregivers hold. And Lori, I'm curious your perspective on this.
Yeah. So I think this goes back to really knowing, right? Knowing and understanding triggers. I think, you know, in my experiences, trying to keep everything as routine as possible and as consistent as possible. And also in my family, having the conversation about, you know, building awareness, having those conversations about boundaries, right? Like if your child can't be around big crowds, like you might have to say it a million times, but, you know, having that boundary in your life that, you know, this just doesn't work for us. You know, a lot of triggers can change as a child ages, but a lot of times they're very similar. They're just maybe on a different level. I just saw an image of, you know, we tend to think of being neurodiverse as being like linear, you know, those, you know, that high functioning, low functioning. Sorry, I have a fly that's, and the image kind of put it into a circle and then had like spikes outside the circle. So like maybe sensory is a, you know, big factor in this neurodiversity. You know, maybe having like, you know, more of like things lined up, everything has to be orderly and perfect where I left it could be bigger. So I think that idea of like having, it's not linear. It's not about how smart a child is. It's not about how well they, you know, fit into this little box that we like to put children in. It's about like, who is my child and where do they thrive? And, you know, like every child has a place where they thrive, right? I think when we focus on the ways that they struggle, that is emotionally heavy, right? Like when you focus on the struggle as opposed to the positives, you know, you're up all night worrying about all the things that we can't do, as opposed to like the wins. I know, you know, and I think getting breaks, like I'm the person who is like, the only time my children are away from me are when they're at school. And I think that's not always a positive thing, right? We need to know when we need to take a break and gain perspective and be, you know, sleep, you know, when you have children with special needs, sleep is often like an interrupted thing. So if you're not getting rest, like everything else is just magnified. I don't really know what I just said, but I feel like it made sense.
And that's why I love that you honored. Yeah, there's so much. I'm going to answer. I'll reflect on that in a second. Go ahead, Natalie.
Well, yeah, Laurie, well done. What you said made sense, even if it didn't feel like it, but it was great. Yeah, and this really comes down to managing yourself, I think, as well, and being hyper aware of how you're feeling and being part of a community. I really think that that's just critical with everything that you're going through, to have people that understand your journey and that you don't necessarily have to explain it, but they just get it. And having the comfort in that when you're surrounded by so many people who don't get it. So I think just having that sense of belonging and looking after yourself is just critical in those circumstances. Yeah.
Now, I have like a question about that, because a community doesn't need to be big either. It could be like 1 to 2 people, like you're just starting slow. And I'm a huge advocate for create what you want or need. So oftentimes I see people being like, I can't find my people. I can't find my community. And I'm like, that's because it's your job and responsibility to create it. And so when I was a young parent, I remember creating like a little meetup for like teen parents, and I met like two amazing women, and we would go on little adventures together. And that's the little pocket that they were for me. Oftentimes what I hear though is that people will join groups or communities, like maybe free communities, and they're not a fan of the energy that is in the community because it's like victim or martyr, and it's like poor me, and everyone's overwhelmed, and they're like, I'm here to get support on how can we do both of these well. Natalie, I'm curious if you experienced any of that.
Yeah, it's interesting, even having a son with a profound hearing loss as well. I had to build a community myself, because what I found was so many people want to sit around and talk about how hard it is and what a struggle it is. And for me, I just didn't get that. It wasn't achieving anything. It's kind of like, okay, so, everybody gets something. What can we do here to help each other to get to this next level and this next level with our children? But those communities don't just fall out of the air. And like you said, sometimes they generate so much negativity that it becomes unhelpful. So for me, it was going, okay, so who do I want to be around? Okay, I want to be around someone where the bar is up here. I don't need the bar being down here. So then you find those people, and then you start to have coffee with them. You start to, build those relationships. But you're right. It's not about having, 100 people in your community, but it's the right people, so yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't even need to start around your children. It could be walking. It could be, like you said, coffee. And you're like, you know what, let's not even talk about the children and their needs, because that's 99% of my day. And I just need to be around people who don't want to talk about that, but can understand, the nonverbal communication in the room is that we are all in a similar boat, but we're going to be together for a different thing. Maybe it's fitness, maybe it's a creative project, who knows? So I want to answer, and we've been talking for almost 50 minutes already, which we could do this. Clearly we could do this all day, because I'm really excited and could do this forever. But I want to talk about this question: how can we as mothers keep our goals and dreams alive when navigating the pain, the grief, the loss that can come with children and special needs? So I want to back up a little bit. My children, nobody even knows the diagnosis of my children and where they are, because it doesn't need to be public knowledge. And my whole platform is not built off of, I have children with XYZ, right? My goal is to always raise happy, calm, and emotionally intelligent children, regardless of a diagnosis. I hear so much from humans, parents, men, women, whatever, caregivers, that when they have this aha moment that I have invested so much money, time, and energy trying to fix my child versus accepting my child. And that is the essence of control, right? When we're like, I'm doing everything. And from my personal experience having cancer, and I've watched it in people too, where they're like, I'm just trying to heal. And there's this push energy around it. There's this like fear around it. And that is literally when you let go and accept your child, your circumstance. That's when you open the floodgates to give yourself permission to heal, right? Grief is a real frickin' process. And traditionally, we believe that when people die, that's when we start grieving. First of all, it never goes away. It's a cycle. It's not, literally, it's not, time heals all wounds. That's complete bullshit. Grief is a process. And you could just be driving down the road and all of a sudden a song comes on and a huge wave just comes and smacks you in the face. And that doesn't even have to be with somebody who has physically passed. We're constantly grieving. We're constantly letting go, right? We're recording this where I live. I know Natalie is probably not the same for you, but like summer is coming to an end. I think your winter is coming. Are your winter coming to an end?
Yeah, we've just hit spring.
Oh, you lucky little duck. Well, not lucky. I'm getting out of summer. So you're probably like, you're in it right now. But anyways, every season, right? You get this feeling of like, oh, it's gone. And like, you're grieving the loss of like, what just happened versus what's coming. And there's that sense of like completion that is deep, deep, deep to feel. And so I always tell people, when they're like, what is it, that fulfillment you're seeking or feeling alive? I'm like, you got to feel the deep grief to feel the deep gratitude. And we're taught not to feel. So it's like, it's a feeling journey to dive deeper and deeper and deeper. Now, going on the other side of the spectrum, goals, dreams, desires, you got to fight for that. Because culturally, just like what we said, it is socially unacceptable for you to be dead inside. It is socially unacceptable for you to be exhausted, overwhelmed, chronically fatigued. We live in a culture of disease that loves labels, and you have to look at yourself in the mirror every single day and say, not this, not this. And you have to literally fight to reverse engineer the life that you want. I say fight, but what I mean by that is being wildly intentional with how you want to feel. I can have a child with a diagnosis who's struggling in school, who's struggling in so many areas of his life, and be like, you know what? You love art, and we're going to do so much freaking art in your life. And I'm going to go out and live my best life. Why? Because when I am alive and energized, that child is like, I'm okay. My mother loves me for who I am, and I can accept who I am. This is deep, 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 deep work. I've come to a point in my life where I realize the more I go after the dream and the more I feel alive, that's exactly what my children need from me. And I think the grief and sadness is that the world is not built for children like that, for humans like that. But let's be honest, that the ones that do fit the mold come out typically the other side unfulfilled because they were taught to check the boxes and they do what they're told. And then they're like, I climbed the ladder. What did I miss? And again, it always comes back to what's your dream? What's your desire? Who do you want to be? So we think it is, the humans that have been labeled that are so far out of the box. And I just think those are the easy ones to pick out. But I think we're all suffering, whether it's internal or external in some capacity with cultural expectations. So I'm a little rebel and I'm like, how do you want to feel? Go for it. And if you piss somebody off while you're doing it, you're probably headed in the right direction, because that's literally how we're going to change the conversation of parenting, everything that we do. So we're going to wrap it up, but I'm curious, what message do you want to give the listeners of hope and possibility when it comes to children, teens, mental and emotional health? This is not a quick fix or even a simple conversation. So what would you like to leave them with, both of you?
So teaching during the pandemic, virtually specifically, has really just magnified a lot of problems that already existed. And one of the biggest struggles that I see with parents of teenagers is this battle between the life that the parent sees for the child and the life that, the child wants. And I think getting on board with your child in a way that's going to be supportive and get them what they want is probably better for mental and emotional health. I think when we're talking about grief, a lot of times we're talking about the grief of the life we envisioned. And when these things happen along the way, it's not even the event, it's the effect of this event. This is not what I imagined happening. And you have to let go of that dream and that vision. I think that often happens too with a diagnosis, or you're recognizing the special needs that exist in your life. And you're like, all of these things that I thought, right, I feel like they're out the door. That doesn't mean that your child can't lead a happy, successful life where they're a contributing member of society. It just might look different than the way that you envisioned it originally. And I think that's true about adults too, right? When we have these moments where something happens, and if you don't grieve that moment of like what you feel like you're losing, then you might not be able to see the opportunities that exist, because I believe in even the darkest moments, there are moments for opportunity. It just might look differently than we originally thought.
Awesome. Natalie?
I guess I'll leave you with a little visual that I share with my mums and really with my kids, because I like to do things, have lots of fun with the kids. And I teach them that life is like a giant game of snakes and ladders. And in this game, we all get snakes and we all get ladders, and it's 50-50. So nobody in life gets all ladders. So when you can accept that, like, you can't have the good without the bad, you can't have the positive without the negative, it's kind of not so scary. And so I teach my girls that, when you see a python or a little snake that's in your path, you get to choose how you're going to deal with that. You can be scared and try and run away from it, or you can actually stop and look at it and get the lesson that it has for you, and then roll the dice and keep moving forward. And so for me, it's just a good visual for life that, we don't have control of all of the circumstances, but we most definitely have control on how we choose to respond, and how we choose to think about everything in our life, everything that happens in our life. Yeah.
Thank you. And I want to add just to that, and maybe this is just the perspective of where I am now, and someone might need to hear this, but it also gave me that visual of like bringing people with you, right? Like lifting them up. And so as you are at top of one of your ladders, like that is the gift that we need to give to the world, is giving back, whether it's using our voice, creating, those tiny, tiny communities. It could be one cup of coffee, a walking group, like whatever it is, when you're thinking, I'm not qualified or I'm not this, like, we really just need to be that light for other people. And that's also the beauty of doing this work, whether your why is for your children, the why is for yourself, just speaking up and out, and being that light for somebody. So yeah, when I started, it was for my children, my son, and then it became for my children. And then I only started speaking out because I was alone. I felt alone. And then I realized, now I show up for other people. So this is how we're going to change the world. So where can people find you? Natalie, where are you online if someone wants to follow you? Instagram? Where do you hang out?
Yeah, I hang out mainly on Facebook. I'm still got my L plates on for Instagram. But you can pretty much go to my website. It's flyingminds.com.au. And all my links are there for the social as well. If any of you want to join Mind Fit for Mums and just be part of a community that is actually having these conversations as well and sharing things, we'd love to hear from you in Australia as well.
Yay, I love it. I also love that we can have these conversations from all walks of life, points like globally, and yet still feel like, we're all struggling or challenged with the same things. Can you just say that again? The website was?
The website is Flying Minds, so flying minds.com.au.
Perfect. Yeah. And Lori?
I'm just me. So I don't have a business.
I love it.
Right. So
that's why I was like, where can people find you? You're like, I'm just me, which I love.
I'm just me. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. I think if you just put my name in, you'll probably find me. I'm just me. Yeah.
And Lori is also the one who created the curriculum for the book club with the app that I partnered with called High Tide. So HIITIDE. So if you download the app, we have Dying to Be a Good Mother book clubs, and Lori is the one who created that curriculum. And she's also a part of our community and just like a beacon of hope and love and possibility. So yeah, but that's what I love. And that's what I said. I'm like, real women having real conversations about life. So we take what works, we leave the rest. I always call them breadcrumbs. And just to wrap it up, oh, look, we're going to make it right at the hour. I'm hosting a workshop on I'm like, what day is it? September 16th. So regardless of when you're listening to this, it's at noon Eastern time. A replay will be sent out if you cannot attend live. So it's Thursday, September 16th. And there's a small fee that we're donating to an organization. All the links are on this website, heatherchauvin.com/why not. And actually, if you just go to my website, heatherchauvin.com, you will see it in the banner above. And really, it's essentially me kicking your ass, letting you know, like, why can't you have the life that you want, regardless of what's going on around you? And I think we all hinted here around that growth mindset, right? The shift in energy and focus of where are you focusing your energy and attention, because whatever's happened to you doesn't need to be your I am statement. It doesn't need to be like, I am this, I am that label, my child is this. It's like, how can you? And when you start to dive into that world and think outside the box, that was my biggest shift, realizing that we're so conditioned by mainstream, right? Living mainstream, doing what we think we're supposed to do. And then something triggers us in our lives and we start thinking outside the box. It was a huge mind game. I was going to say the F word, but I won't here. It was a huge mind game for me of I was like, what, am I doing something wrong? Why am I starting to feel good? Why is this working? Right? Did you both have that experience too? And then, you go to the doctor, you go somewhere else and they're like, what are you doing? Keep just doing what you're doing because it's working. So it's a beautiful thing. And we're shifting the conversation through how you think, how you act, and how we treat others. So just read the book that falls off the shelf for you and be the lead. So thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, Lori and Natalie. And I'm so incredibly grateful for this conversation. And we'll continue.
Thank you guys.
Bye. Bye everyone.
Bye.
Well, that's it. And I wanted to thank you for listening today because I truly believe you are exactly where you need to be. And now I have a favor to ask. In exchange for the value you've gained from this free podcast, I'd be forever grateful if you would leave us a review on iTunes. Share the show with at least one woman in your life who you feel would benefit, and or take a screenshot and share it on social media. And always feel free to tag me at Heather Chauvin. The world does not benefit from your guilt and fatigue. The world needs more women who are willing to unlearn everything they've been taught. Women who are courageous enough to feel good and not let guilt run the show. I believe you are that courageous woman. To see if my community and coaching is the right fit for you and your big vision, the relationships you desire, the money, time, energy that you know deep down you are capable of creating, then head on over to heatherchauvin.com/work with me. That's Heather Chauvin, CHAUVIN.com/work with me. And take the next step in the right direction. Taking a stand for how you feel means you are taking a stand for how your children show up as adults. And if you have a personal question or topic you'd like me to answer on the podcast, text me 313-710-5199. 313-710-5199. You are so worthy of feeling good. Now go do some scary shit.